Let's talk now to Martin Speake, who's a jazz teacher. He was cancelled, would you believe, by a prestigious music school in this country because of something he said about the system not being racially unequal. He basically said there is no systemic racial inequality in the UK jazz scene. As a result, after being an academic and saxophonist for over 50 years, he's been forced to resign from a place called Trinity Laban, a school well known for providing very, very excellent teaching to young people. Martin joins us now. We'll find out exactly what happened. Martin, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I mean, you committed the heinous crime of stating an opinion based on the facts of the matter about racial inequality in the jazz scene. Tell us the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a nuanced and long story, but I'll try and keep it brief for you and your listeners. Yeah, I've been teaching at Trinity Laban 22 years, and I'm very involved in jazz education, as you mentioned, also at other conservatoires. And the principal of Trinity Laban over the last couple of years sent a couple of emails to all staff and all students saying there's systemic inequality and supporting BLM diversity policy, which, as you know, is everywhere. And so, as an experienced jazz musician for 40 years, playing and teaching for a long time, I commented on it. And in fact, he asked for feedback. And I know for a fact I was the only one in the whole place who fed back. So I fed back an email and suggested discussion on this issue. But, you know, an interesting issue in the music scene, and nuanced, and I've never had a reply, and this is nearly a year later. That was the beginning of it. I shared it with one student, an interesting student who we always chatted about all kinds of things, and I thought that's what you're supposed to do in the academic world with young adults, talk about interesting subjects. You know, you don't have to agree. And he shared it with a half dozen students, and one of those got anxious. I don't like what Martin's saying here, and went into the head of jazz, who was a friend of mine for 30 years, interestingly, and instead of calling me in, let's all talk about it, bypassed me, and the wheels of motion were set, and the students then heard about the email, although I hadn't seen it, and decided to boycott my lessons. So I was then not suspended, they didn't call it suspended, but that's a legal term, and would mean they'd have to discipline me, which they couldn't. They hadn't done anything wrong. So they temporarily suspended my classes. This is in March, remember. Right. And it's only now, this is the first time I've been able to speak publicly about it, because there's been a whole legal process going on. And it culminated me in the end of having to resign. They made it so untenable. At the end of, I was on sick leave for 5 months, and then at the beginning of the autumn term, they scheduled my classes as normal, 3 days of classes, but it was 100% boycott by the students. And Trinity Laban supported them on this rather than supporting me. So I was totally discriminated against. And in the end, they made it untenable. I had to resign. I have to say, I've had incredible support from the Free Speech Union throughout this, morally, financially, and legally, appointing an excellent solicitor. So what's going on now, I have 2 legal cases against them. Discrimination in work, in employment, at the time I was there, and then made it so untenable, I've got constructive dismissal.
That's extraordinary. Well. And were you ever told at any point, you know, this is why? And
No, this is the, I mean, this, you might know this goes on forever now. There's no discussion about the issue. At all, and that's what I wanted all along. I'm not even saying I'm right, actually. It's not a right or wrong issue. It's just my experience playing music professionally and teaching for 40 years.
Well, I mean, in a teaching environment, surely the ideas are what is important. You're supposed to talk about ideas. You're supposed to have opinions. You're supposed to encourage other people to argue with those opinions. I mean, that's what I remember from going to school, you know?
Exactly, yeah, and we're probably roughly the same age. So in those days, you could talk about anything.
Right.
You didn't have to fall out about it, and you certainly didn't have to be cancelled. That wasn't a word in our culture, was it? Cancelled, being cancelled.
Right. And
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, we've contacted the Trinity Laban, the Conservatoire of Music and Dance. They haven't come back to us. The London Jazz Orchestra has also been contacted. They haven't come back. It's quite an extraordinary story, really, because at the end of the day, it's one single thing that you've written down, which was written down a long time ago, and here we are, it's still not resolved. I mean, presumably it will take another several months for it to be resolved.
Well, I mean, just on that, I'm going to broaden this out a bit now, because we've got a couple of minutes. There's an employment tribunal set for nearly 2 years' time.
Wow.
So all my income has gone.
Yeah.
Because this had a knock-on effect on 2 other conservatoires in London I teach at,
right.
where they just went in lockstep. Oh, the students are anxious because of your email, which has been circulated online, and the social media storm of that. So the students decide. I mean, the head of music and the head of jazz at Trinity Laban have told me this in a meeting. No, the students decide, they're customers.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? Amazing.
So on one hand, I just want to say something. On one hand, students are considered anxious, so they're like children. They're treated like children. Oh, they're poor little things. They're anxious. On the other hand, they can decide my livelihood. They're mature enough to decide that all my work should be cancelled.
Yeah.
Now, they're young, they're immature, they're undeveloped, and I was at that age. I wouldn't have tried to disrupt someone's life. And further to that, the ramifications of this, as you mentioned, the London Jazz Orchestra, that was a big band that I played in for 15 years, told me to step down.
Right.
Jazz clubs have cancelled gigs. One club even paid me, they paid the band to not go there.
Wow.
They paid the fee to not go, Leicester Jazz House.
Right.
It's insanity. It's insanity.
That is mad, isn't it? Completely mad. So, I mean, and presumably you can't just turn up anywhere and get work in another orchestra or another band, because the word will be out, presumably.
No, it's not going to happen.
So what do you hope will happen at the end of all of this?
Well, really, I want huge compensation and a public apology.
Yeah.
For doing nothing wrong.
Right.
I'm bringing up a subject that might be a challenging subject for people to talk about.
Right. But it shouldn't be, though.
No. Race and jazz.
I mean, your contention was basically that black musicians are not underrepresented in the UK, but actually they have far more opportunities than many other people, which doesn't seem to me to be a particularly controversial view.
I think that's the case now. You know, festivals say, can you have a black musician in your band?
Yeah.
You know? They literally say that.
Right.
You can go on websites of festivals that, you know, all in the so-called idea of diversity, which, by the way, I think is a very shallow way of talking about diversity. Skin colour, pigmentation of skin. I'll give you an example. First, for instance, Trinity Laban, you could have, say you have 50% women, 50% black people there as staff and students, but they're all from the south of England and they're all middle class.
Yeah.
That is not diversity.
No. Well, it's like I say the same. I say the same about the BBC. You know, the BBC has got plenty of people with different skin colours working there, but they're all middle class. They've all been to the same schools. They're not diverse at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Well, listen, I wish you well, because it seems incredibly unfair, Martin. And if you've got the Free Speech Union behind you, though, you've got the best of the bunch there. You've got good help. So hopefully they'll get you over the line, and your life can return to normal at some point.
Been excellent, I have to say that, and just maybe you could say there is a crowdfunder to help with my legal fees, because this would be 2 years long, but I don't know how I'm going to get any work back.
Yeah, right.
Spread the word.
Yeah, we'll do.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Not at all. Not at all. We'll see if we can get some people to book you for some private sessions or something like that. Bit of music teaching.